Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea DeHaan. I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences here at Utah State University, and we are excited to have you joining us today for our special CHaSS Alumni Lunch Series presentation. I'm just going to take you through a few quick housekeeping items to get us sort of started today, and then I will be introducing our guest and my co-host. So I do want to remind you that we're using the Zoom webinar format, which means that while you're here, and we're glad you're here, we can't see or hear from you directly on screen, but we would still like to hear you weigh in. And there are several ways you can do that. You can use the chat feature to say hello, let us know what your major is or where you're listening from today. But there's also a Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen, and that's going to be the best place for you to put your questions for our guests. So while our guest is presenting today, if questions come up for you that you'd like answered, please go ahead and populate that Q&A tool, and we will get to those questions at the end of our presentation today. You can also find more information about our upcoming presentations and recordings at chassusu.edu/alumni lunch series. So be sure to check out that website, find out everything we have going on this spring. Remember, it's only February. We've still got a few months to go, and we've still got a lot of great programming. I also want to take a quick moment with an actionable item. You know, we invite our students to these presentations so that they can get experience networking and or learning from the experiences of our esteemed alumni. But today we're going to be talking to someone who has had a lot of experience working in higher education. And if you are someone who is interested in this path, I do want to recommend to you that one of the best ways to get your foot in the door is to start working in higher education while you are a benefit of higher education. That means while you're a student now, working for one of the departments on campus is a great way to get your foot in the door. And CHaSS is currently hiring. We are looking for new peer ambassadors and advisors for the 2021-2022 school year. So if you are listening today and you're a CHaSS major or a CHaSS double major and you're interested in getting experience in advising, experience in recruiting, and learning what the ins and outs of a staff department look like on a college campus, we'd love to have you apply. So later I'll put that information in the chat so that you can find the links to that. Just wanted to give you an actionable item as something that might interest you if you'd like to pursue that. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest. Our guest today is Aaron Andersen. He holds a degree in history from Utah State, and he is a senior partner with the Cicero Group. At Cicero, he focuses on helping organizations develop data-driven strategies to grow sustainably and realize enhanced operational efficiencies in the context of rapidly evolving domestic and international markets. Aaron spent over a decade working in leadership roles in higher education, culminating in his role as a principal organizational consultant, where he led institution-wide operational restructuring efforts at the University of California, Berkeley. His higher education experience, marked by stints at his undergraduate alma mater, Utah State University, and his graduate alma maters, Cornell and Harvard University, also includes leadership of significant vertical initiatives, including policy, process standardization, student success, outcomes evaluation and optimization, targeted growth strategy, and strategic planning. Since joining Cicero Group nearly a decade ago, Aaron has led large-scale engagements with clients across industries, with particular focus on his leadership of Cicero's burgeoning higher education consulting practice. Beyond his work in higher education, Aaron's portfolio of work includes ongoing partnerships with global nonprofits, Fortune 100 companies, and internationally acclaimed performing arts organizations, as well as advisory roles with a corpus of innovative startups and industry disruptors. Aaron holds master's degrees from Harvard University and Cornell University in higher education and public administration, respectively. He holds a bachelor's degree in history from Utah State University. And he and his wife, and I'm already going to butcher her name, is it Lauren? Okay, I got closer to it. We were talking about that in the chat beforehand. Reside in South Jordan, Utah with their 3 indefatigable children. So Aaron, we would love to turn the time over to you, and we are just so pleased to have you joining us today. Thank you for making the time to talk to us this hour. And we would love to hear more about you and your career experience since graduating. And you've got some wonderful experiences in the professional setting, and we'd just love to hear more about it. So welcome.
Great, Andrea, thank you, and thank you, London, as well. Thank you to Dean Ward, if he's here, listening someplace. I really appreciate the invitation. A couple things right from the get-go to say here that I think are worth saying. First of all, that's the bio that exists, I think, on our company's website, and I sent it over to Andrea, and just hearing it, and I've heard it before, but like, especially in this setting, that's really pretentious sounding. There's way too many multi-syllabic words in there. Here's what I do. I help organizations fix things that are broken or build things that need building, full stop. And that's a really fun job. And that's kind of been my career, whether it's been in higher education or consulting. So that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit. And before I'm going to bring some slides up here in a second. But I do want to say just a quick note on the format here. I'm in front of this screen all day, every day. I'm coming to you live from my home in South Jordan, in a repurposed home office. The actual home office area has been overrun by kindergarten, and we learned about a day into the pandemic that the kids have way too much access to dad. So I'm kind of in a repurposed guest room home office setup. And I spend my days in here. There are a couple limitations of Zoom. One is I can't read the room at all, other than what you send me in chat. So please send questions, those sorts of things. I know London's going to be compiling them. I'm glad to be interrupted with questions. I'm going to save some time at the end for questions as well. So please, I can't see faces because it's a webinar, and so that means, please let me know if there's a question or a thread you want to pull on. Let me know. That's one note about Zoom. The other sort of disadvantage to Zoom is that this is a set meeting time. We're done at 1:30 here, and I love nothing more than when I get asked to come speak at something, to spend some time afterwards and talk to the folks who are there. And so I don't know if this violates. We didn't talk about this, Andrea, but if it violates policy, then okay. But I'm happy to clear a little additional time if folks want to talk, right? And for the students that are here listening today, Andrea talked about sort of my experience and how we can latch on to some of my experience in higher education. If at the end of this, especially if you're a current student at Utah State or otherwise, and you want to talk about just ideas or thoughts or heaven forbid some advice about getting into the world of either consulting or higher education, please, I hereby authorize Andrea and everybody else to share my contact information if we can't talk after, because I'd love to be able to chat. That's the joy that I get from these sorts of things, right? There are some benefits to Zoom too, though. And if we have time at the end, I'll be glad to share the longer version of the story. My shoes are not wearing out as much. Anyone that might be here that knows me knows that it's very difficult for me to sit still for any amount of time. And so Zoom has taught me that I have to be, I've gotten feedback from my team members that I wave my hands enough that I make people dizzy on Zoom meetings, so I apologize for that. But if I'm in a room with you, I'm pacing around and I'm moving my arms. And the story that I can share at the end, if we have time, is of an occasion on which I injured my hand so badly that I thought I was going to need medical attention in the middle of giving a presentation because of a dramatic gesticulation that I made partway through the presentation. Let's save that for the end. So what I want to talk about today, I'm going to bring my slides up here, are what I will call a compendium of disabusable notions. I included the word disabusable here on purpose for this presentation specifically. Why? Because disabusable is not a word. But in my time at Utah State, and in my time, now you have to forgive me, when I was there, it was the College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences. So I got to check myself and say the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. I was a philosophy minor, a history major, philosophy minor. And I took a great class that I loved from Chuck Johnson. And we studied Wittgenstein, the philosophy of language. And the takeaway from that class was that in language, meaning is use. And so you could shout entirely the wrong word, but in the right setting and with the right context, people would understand what you mean. And I sort of threw that out as I threw the word disabusable in there, knowing that it's not a word, as sort of a tip of the cap to that very specific class that I really loved back in my time at Utah State. So we're going to talk about some disabusable notions today. What do I mean by that? the disabusable notions, these are things that at, say, 21 years old, I really believed, genuinely. And now, over the course of the years that have followed, I've come to realize simply are not true. And we'll walk through that. And that'll be my sort of, and let's call it what it is. That's my framing to sort of tell the story of kind of where I've been and what I've learned and those sorts of things. But we'll kind of wind our way through that. So let's start with the very first one. And that is that you have to make a plan and stick to it no matter what. So, and by the way, I was made aware about 10 minutes before the presentation that any number of my siblings and potentially aunts and uncles and immediate family are watching right now, which I wasn't prepared for, but I welcome. The one problem here is it limits the amount of fabricating that I can do here, because they'll call me on it. They'll put it in the chat, and then London will see it, and she'll call me on it. So I have to be careful. No, so these stories are all true. I grew up, I'm from Logan. I grew up in Logan. So those of you that have spent some time at Utah State probably know where Lundstrom Park is. I grew up about a block away from Lundstrom Park. And an impressionable kid, and talk to anyone who knew me, starting, at a very young age, the path was going to be law school, right? I knew I was going to study history as an undergraduate. I cared deeply about it. I loved studying it. And then law school was the plan. Went all the way through my years at Utah State with that as the plan, and many years prior to that. I took the LSAT at probably I was probably 21 and a half years old. I'd been on a 2-year mission for my church. I'd just gotten home. I took the LSAT. I was ready to go, even though I had 3 years before I was to graduate. My applications for the law schools were in early. I got into the schools I wanted to get into. I was very excited. And then I started taking trips to a couple of the schools that I'd been admitted to. And I returned home from a trip to the East Coast and announced to my mom, I didn't think I was going to law school anymore. Now, mind you, the timing of this announcement was terrible. I was about a month away from graduating. I needed to make a deposit and pick a school right away because I was going to be starting that fall. And suddenly the course had changed. And I'll tell you, I've never had a more unpleasant flying experience than that flight home across the country, because I had something speak to me while I was there that said, no, I don't think so. And it was nothing about the schools and nothing about the experience and the people that I met, but I sort of knew after seeing what I saw and experiencing what I experienced that maybe this wasn't for me. And that was quite a wrestle, and it was a hard thing to wrestle with, and it was a hard thing to wrestle with communicating to people that I knew, and yet there I was, and there was some honesty behind it. So what did I do? Well, I wasn't ready to learn this lesson yet. I wasn't ready to divert away from my plan. So I actually, and I, times were a little different then. I don't think all the schools talk to each other the way they do now. I actually made deposits at 3 schools. And I thought, okay, if I can just buy myself a little bit of time, maybe it's cold feet, maybe this will pass, we'll be okay. We'll get into the summer and then we'll figure it out, we'll go, right? Well, that just didn't happen. Time started to pass. And then I thought, okay, and I saw it, and I actually got deferment at 2 of the schools that I've been accepted to. And again, I'm glad. I think these days they talk to each other, and that probably wouldn't have worked. But they said, okay, we'll defer your admission for a year, right? And I thought, okay, that'll give me a year to kind of figure things out, and then I should be all set. Maybe I can just get rid of the anxiety I feel about all this or whatever. But I needed a new plan. Suddenly I was graduated. I didn't have really anything in front of me now for the first time in my life. I needed to figure some things out. More than anything, I needed a job. And so I had been, Andrea spoke of job opportunities in the college right now. I had worked as a student employee for a number of years as a member of the A team at Utah State. Some of you know what that is. It's this new student orientation staff. They were in need of a new program administrator. I still remember, I was aware that the opening was coming. I kind of started asking around, thinking, well, this is something I could do for a minute. I know the office, those sorts of things. Then I still remember when I saw the job description, and to this day, I think about it and think, gosh, I almost didn't apply, because they wanted a master's degree and someone with 5 to 8 years of experience and the typical things you see in a job description. I thought, well, I don't have those. But I went and talked to my very first boss as a professional employee, John Mortensen, who was the head of the office at the time. And I talked to John, and he said, well, you're okay to apply. You know the office. And so I got bold. But I didn't just apply. I don't think many people know this, and I'm not sure even John would remember it. But I showed up before I even submitted my application. I showed up with sort of my theses to go ahead and pound on the door. I showed up with about 150 ideas for things that we could do to improve new student orientation, new student programming at Utah State, and said, okay, here's my application. Also, here are my ideas. And said, give me a year. I need a year to figure things out. Give me a year to run this show, and let's see how we do. Talk about plans changing. About 3 months into the year, I said, no, I'm not, it's definite. I'm not going to law school. I love this. I love higher education. Wow, and that's nothing that had ever occurred to me, right? I loved my job before, working in that office as a student, and I loved the people that I worked with, and I liked what we were doing, but suddenly I found something. Wow, wait a minute, we can help improve student outcomes. We can help make the path a little easier for people as they're getting started. We can help show them a better way. Great, count me in. So what was going to be a year for me, and I think we talked about it at the time, I think John and I talked about it, I said, I'll give you a year, and then we'll see where things go. Turned it into 3.5 years. And really gratifying years, right? So I kind of figured it out. Okay, higher ed, let's do this, right? And so I started to make a path, and I started to sort of, well, I need to go to graduate school, and that's important. And I need to sort of bolster my education. And the path then led me to a master's degree in public administration. I wanted to sort of a broad base of skills that I could work from in a career in higher education. So I went to Cornell, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And sort of map that plan. And I went there specifically because of their strength, that school's strength in education, right? So that I could do kind of what I wanted in the broad educational path that I was pursuing, and also start, really pursuing in earnest this plan in higher education, right? I went on from there to specialize and got another master's degree at Harvard in higher education, and I found my expertise. I found my spot. And after a lot of consideration and a lot of talking, a lot of interesting thinking, I actually came back home and was recruited to come back home and work again back here at my alma mater and at my home at Utah State. Different role, different responsibilities, new things to do, and spent a few more years there. But again, to this lesson, to the point that I think needed driving home for me many times was. And by the way, the plan coming out of there was the next 40 years spent doing just this. I will work within institutions to do what I'm going to do. But a few years in and had the most wonderful colleagues and lifelong friends and things that to this day I'm very proud of doing. But I realized a handful of years into it that as much as I loved Utah State and as much as I loved the work that I was doing, I was bored. And it took me a little while to diagnose the basis of the boredom. Is it the wrong position? Is it the wrong what? And I don't know that I was terribly honest with myself. And I realized, wait a second, no, I've got a lot of itches that aren't being scratched here, right? I'm a decade into my career now, and yet there are things that I'm interested in that I don't get to do here at all. I'm not having the kind of impact that I think I could be having. Okay, so I need to get honest with myself again. And I realized I needed a change. That's sort of a painful realization. It's a little easier. It's a little easier conversation to have with yourself at 24 than it is to have with yourself at, say, 34. So I needed a change. And that sort of led me down a completely different path that we're gonna follow up on in a second. I want to push the pause button there now and come back a little bit, right, to the second disabusable notion, and that is that to succeed or find acceptance, you have to fit a specific mold, right? I mentioned that I grew up in Cache Valley, right? I have been present for the birthing of a calf. I have moved a lot of sprinkler line. I have hauled hay, but also as a kid growing up in Cache Valley, I read F. Scott Fitzgerald. I sunk myself into Thomas Hardy. I was obsessed with bands from England. I saw a future for myself outside of Cache Valley. And there was always a bit of tension there within me, right? Because I am and was who I am and where I was from, but I also saw, other places in me and other things and other interests and things. I never thought much about that tension until it was time for me to pick up and move across the country. And I'll tell you, if any of you have ever seen the movie Legally Blonde, this is an anecdote that I've shared before, but I remember my very first day when I got to Cornell. And Cornell, as a kid growing up in Cache Valley, I'd always sort of had the back of my mind, wouldn't it be fun if I could make it to an Ivy League school someday? And that was a big part of what drove me, right? Well, I got there, and I had a very Elle Woods experience on my first day at Cornell. And it was orientation. You can picture sort of the group of people sitting around introducing themselves. And these are my new classmates in my graduate program. And one after another, they're going around the circle and talking about where they did their prep school, and then which other Ivy League institution they went to for their undergraduate work, and then the global nonprofit that they've been working for the past 3 years before coming to. And I was like at the end of the circle, and I just remember feeling smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as each person spoke, because I thought, oh, what's my story? I'm from Logan. I stayed in Logan for school and I had a great experience, and I loved the people there. And then I worked in Logan, and what are people going to think of me? And oh my goodness! And I was worried that I wasn't going to fit because I didn't fit that mold. That I didn't fit the mold that existed there. Similarly to how I wasn't sure that I was fit a Cache Valley mold necessarily either, right? And so there was a bit of that tension really came to the surface. And so I was kind of quiet. I introduced myself in that setting, and for the first semester, I was really quiet about who I was and where I was from. I didn't let my Western roots show. I tried to be smart. I tried to act like I knew what it was all about, to talk about it, going to a party in the Hamptons or whatever it was that they talked about. And I tried, and then a group of friends, and this is a dumb story and it's a dumb moment in my life, but it really did something. A group of friends from my program, from my graduate program, had sent out a little email across the program saying, we're going to go to this new little indie movie that's playing down at the theater in town. Anybody from the program, and we had a relatively small program, 70 or so students. Anybody that wants to join can join in. We're going to go do this on Friday night. The movie that they were going to was a little cinematic masterpiece that was just scratching the surface, called Napoleon Dynamite. If you've ever seen Napoleon Dynamite, and we're past the point where it's probably a real strong part of popular culture, but it was a big deal at the time. If you have or haven't seen it, you know that Napoleon Dynamite was this weird little movie that was filmed in Preston, Idaho, right? So just a few miles north of where I'm from. And I actually didn't know that it was filmed in Preston. I knew a little bit about the movie. I didn't know it was filmed in Preston. When I went with my friends, and I sat there and I said, oh my word, oh my. I sat through the whole movie just with kind of butterflies floating up. And so we're talking after we went to some restaurant or something. I said, guys, that's where I'm from. And they said, wait. Is that what it's like? And I said, well, not exactly. I mean, I don't think we're all retro people the way that they're all retro people or whatever else, but kind of. And the curiosity that was piqued in that setting was interesting to me. And I realized, wait a minute, these people are interested in what I have to say about my background. It's not just about the what it's like growing up in Westchester. It's about the diversity of different experiences, and I have something valuable. By the time I was done there, I was ready to buy a pair of cowboy boots. I found that I could be who I was, and it didn't matter that I didn't grow up going to the parties in Westchester, and I didn't grow up with an elite prep school education or anything else, right? It took a minute for me to be sure that I was smart enough to fit there. It took a minute for me to feel like my background was good enough, but also culturally, I realized I don't have to fit a mold. It's interesting now, because as I think about the world that I occupy now, right? Management consulting. I work with Fortune 100 companies. I work with some of the largest universities in the United States and in the world, some massive global nonprofits, right? And I always sort of thought that again, in business, you needed to sort of fit a certain archetype. You needed to you needed to walk in a room and carry yourself a certain way and talk a certain way and use certain vocabulary words and things. One of the things that I learned very quickly after jumping into this world is that, well, that not only is that not necessarily true, that the same lesson that I learned via Napoleon Dynamite at Cornell was applicable to the work that I do now, right? And it's applicable not just to me, but to our firm as well, right? To give you some background, I'm a senior partner at Cicero Group. We're based here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've been here for a little while now. I've helped the firm grow from what was a handful of people to now, we've got offices in Dallas and Washington D.C. We've got dozens of people working all across the country in remote locations, along with a very large cohort of people working for us here at Salt Lake. And I thought, I paused to reflect on what's helped us to grow. We are not rocket scientists. We're really good at what we do. But the things that we do are accessible to most folks, right? But what makes us good? Part of it is that we don't fit a mold, right? Consulting comes with some well-earned reputational elements, right? Well, the consultants are coming, they're going to show up and do this. And we tend to kind of buck at those notions. We tend to sort of show up and say, well, wait a minute, we don't have to think about things that way. Why don't we look at it a different way? Why don't we bring a different idea to this? Why don't we examine the data and see what that says, right? And we've learned that by not fitting the mold, and the word disrupt and disruption and disruptive are way overused now, so I'm going to try not to use it. But we found that we've been able to disrupt an industry to an extent by showing up and just being ourselves, right? And part of what's fun, and part of what I think is fun, sort of considering the audience here, is we look at the composition of the senior leadership at our firm. And so there are 4 of us senior partners that sort of run the firm. But across the entire leadership band, you don't have just a team of MBAs, right? We've got a couple of those. We also have people with degrees in education and in history and liberal arts, heaven forbid, and philosophy and English. Which I think in a lot of ways has given us some tools to do just what I'm saying here, which is be willing to break out of the mold. Think about these business problems, these organizational problems a little bit differently, which is something that's valuable. Let's keep pushing forward. You can see that I've only gotten to 2 now, and everybody's watching their clock saying we're halfway through. He's got 2 done. Are we even going to get to the 4th one? The answer, if you know me well, is probably not, but we're going to try our best. Let's talk about the next. I'm going to move actually through the next couple rather quickly because they're a little faster and they're a little bit of fun. You do not need math, and even if you do, you won't like it. At 21, I believe this. Now, when I was a junior in high school at Logan High School, I had a bit of a disagreement with the calculus teacher that I was going to be taking AP Calculus my senior year, and I decided, you know what, that's not for me. I don't want to have to deal with this dude for an entire year. So I didn't take calculus. And then I got to Utah State. I was going to major in history, and I was going to minor in philosophy, and I was going to go to law school. And back in the day, there were loopholes. I didn't have to take Math 1050, right? I didn't have to, so long as I did something else. I'm pretty sure that I fulfilled the requirement by taking a course in deductive logic, which was a great class, but I survived without actually taking any math. I thought I didn't like it, and I thought I wasn't going to use it, and I didn't need it. I'll be brief on this front, but that answer is incorrect. Full stop. I don't care what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, you need math. And by the way, if you're using it in a way that helps supplement whatever it is that you're passionate about, that you care about, you might actually like it. When I got to graduate school, my favorite classes, some of my favorite classes were in hardcore quantitative methods classes, right? Stuff that I was ill prepared to jump into. I jumped into them and loved them, right? So getting to optimization modeling for me wouldn't have meant a thing if it was in the abstract, but if it meant that I could look at ways for an organization to differently hire people into different roles and use math to help guide that, wow, that's kind of cool, right? And I will tell you now, look, I've got, where I stand today, I don't build a lot of models in my day job today, but I did for a lot of years. I've got teams that do that for me now. But I'll tell you, the fact that I can sit and look at a chart and say, no, not this, yes, this, really matters. And so that's my special advice to those of you CHaSS students today, right? I hope it's not too late. Take as much math as you can, because I don't care what you're doing, you're going to benefit from it. So that, okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Another really important notion that needed disabusing. It's really kind of two things. One, pizza is not very good. And two, it's okay to take your time when you're ordering. Specific on that second part, we'll get to it. Cache Valley in the 1980s was not exactly a hotbed for great pizza. So we had, at the time, I think we had Pony Express pizza. I think we might have had, and we had Pizza Hut and we had Domino's. I just didn't like it. I thought it was okay. And it was fun to get it on a Friday night or something, but like pizza was not, I thought it wasn't very good, right? And then I moved to the East Coast. And I'm here to tell you that if you've only experienced Utah pizza, trust me, there's great pizza elsewhere. I learned that when I went to the East Coast. So New York and Boston, great. Pizza's great. And then when I moved to the West Coast, to Berkeley specifically, I learned what pizza really is. There's a little place in Berkeley called the Cheese Board that is the best food on planet Earth. Okay, second, it's okay to take your time when ordering. Okay, so again, growing up in Cache Valley, my experience walking up to the counter at A&W was sort of like this. Okay, let's see. I think I'll go with, and I'm just here to tell you that any of you that are planning on maybe relocating after school, that sort of thing won't fly on the East Coast. Know your order, be ready with it, so that by the time you get to the front of the line, you're ready to go. Otherwise, you might be in for a rude awakening, which is what I certainly was my first time when I went to the Shortstop Deli in Ithaca, New York, and said, well, let me see. And somebody said, all right, back of the line. So do with that what you will. I thought it was okay. It's not okay now. I will tell you, though, on the flip side of things, it used to amuse me to no great end when I would go grocery shopping in Boston. I actually made a bit of a personal challenge out of it. I would go to a Safeway in Boston, and I would try my very best to engage the checkers at the grocery stores in any amount of conversation. And I think I might have been successful one time out of 10 at best. 10% of the time, they'd be willing to even acknowledge me and say a couple words. Now, contrast that with when I'm back home in Cache Valley with my trips to Lee's Marketplace, and the delightful conversations that ensue every time they're scanning my groceries. And it's two different worlds. So again, this is our compendium of disabusable notions. I learned some things about pizza and about how to order quickly when I got there, right? Next, you have to network for the sake of networking if you want a good network. Oh, how that makes me shudder. And I believed it, right? And so, like everybody, I would do the thing where I'd have my printed little business cards, and I'd take them to places, and I would go to conferences, and I would do things. And I thought, this is the way. This is table stakes. I have to do this in order to build a good network. I've got the benefit of a little hindsight now. I have given out thousands, and I do mean thousands of business cards in my career. I don't know if a meaningful thing has come from any of them. That's not to say that it couldn't, but I will tell you this, the most important thing in my professional life has been my network. So what gives? How is this a disabusable notion then, right? If you have to network, no. The thing that I learned is this: what lasts, what endures, what adds value to my life, what adds value to my ability to be able to find value in business are relationships. It's not business cards. It's not shaking hands and then immediately forgetting someone's name. Wait, I don't think we don't shake hands anymore. In fact, I don't think we will anymore after this. So whatever it is that we're going to do after this, bump elbows or whatever, it's not to say you shouldn't do it. I suppose there's some value in it somewhere, but the value in building a network is building a network that is meaningfully constructed of relationships. And again, I can say that with hindsight, but I look back and I can say that the most important professional relationships that I have come as a result of friendships that I've made along the way, right? Two ways to tell this story, right? One is the job that I have now and the career that I have now is a direct result of a friendship that I made when I was at Harvard, right? So my second day there, I was sitting and I'd made a couple new friends. I was sitting down at the little sort of cafeteria that I was grabbing lunch at, and a couple of people that I'd met. And it turns out there was sort of a friend of a friend sitting at the next table, someone that knew somebody that I was talking to, that chimed in on the conversation and said something, I don't remember what it was, but said something audacious. And it was really intelligent, and it was really thoughtful, and it was super audacious. And I thought, I need to be friends with that guy, right? Turns out that those mutual friendships led to a little brown bag lunch, sort of brown bag weekly lunch discussion group that was had among a group of these friends. And this person and I found sort of a mutual kinship around sharing audacious ideas, saying things to perturb orthodoxies just a little bit, and really debating the merits of really complicated things. And we found a friendship in that, right? That friendship turned into additional conversations. And when this person, a friend of mine named Trent Kaufman, said, hey, you know what? Another friend and acquaintance of mine and I are building a little consulting firm. We've got big ideas for it. You want to help us out? That was the beginning of this. And I rebuffed his efforts to recruit me for a few years. Sometimes I regret it, sometimes I don't. I had things I wanted to do in higher education for a little while, but he and I stayed in touch. I did contract work, and we maintained, as much as anything, we maintained a friendship where we could, we'd go golfing together, and we'd dig in on, how are we going to solve the problems of the world, right? How are we going to, and debate big ideas. And this friendship turned into something that became a work relationship. And finally, I capitulated and said, yeah, I think I've done what I came to do in higher education. Yeah, I'll come join. Let's do this consulting thing, right? He's a friend to this day, right? And now he's my business partner. And we work not just as people who networked into each other at something, but people who maintain a friendship now for 16 years over the course of a time when it was just a relationship. And now it's a relationship that's built on this notion of helping organizations succeed and helping grow our organization. So that's one example, right? But when I think about this, when I think about the relationships and the network that matters to me, I look at this now and say, wow, I'm almost a decade into consulting. And I think about this, I haven't traveled in a year. I've sort of been homebound, like most folks, for the past year. Before this, I traveled quite a bit. And I was reflecting, and it was just sort of coincidence, but I was reflecting at some point, about a year ago, and I thought, it's really interesting. I'm at a point now where I can travel to most major American cities and not just know someone there, but have a friend there. That's kind of cool, right? So, meaning someone that I've got in my cell phone, and if heaven forbid something happened to my rental car, that I could call them. Right, and most of these people are people whose organizations I've consulted with, right? So that, again, that's a lesson for me that, yeah, of course, we've added value to their organizations, but there's something about the relationship that exists there that matters to the building of a functioning network. And so if I could give advice on this front to my 21-year-old self, it's, sure, print the business cards. Sure, go to the things, but spend your time building meaningful relationships. Be who you are. Learn who they are. Learn what drives them. Help them understand what drives you. Come together. If it's a business setting, add value to them, but be a person, right? Get to know what their kids are doing in school. Find out what they like, and vice versa. And you'll find that you've got a much more powerful network that will activate and do more things for you than you ever would have imagined by just showing up and handing out business cards at conferences. Okay, I'm going to go fast again here. So next one, happiness is realized primarily at the end of a journey. I've always been about goals, right? If I can just get done with this one thing, then I can breathe, right? If I can just, as soon as I'm done here with graduate school, then that'll be the moment for celebration. And make no mistake, when I walked across the stage at Harvard, it was the culmination of a lifelong thing, and I was elated. But in that moment, I also looked out at the people that were in that room and saw friends. and saw memories. Same thing, I was lucky enough, I was fortunate enough to be invited to speak at my graduation at Cornell. Same experience. I looked out as I talked, and I kept almost getting emotional giving my talk, not because I was emotional about what I was saying, but because I was emotional about the fact that that room was filled with people with whom I had had memories, right? And that's a hard lesson for me to learn because again, I'm devoted to my own success. And success to me means let's get to the finish line and then we breathe, right? But I've learned in some really powerful and important ways that if you're waiting for the end of something before you let yourself be happy, this is all one big journey, right? Anyway, and if you're waiting, you're gonna be waiting a long time, and there's so much happiness to be had along the way, even in the middle of difficult things, even in the middle of challenges, even in the middle of a tough semester or a tough thing that life's handed you. I mean, look, the pandemic right now, right? I mean, this is it's our family, for instance. I think my wife Lorraine and I might have done a couple of jigsaw puzzles together over the course of our decade of marriage before this. We were trying to run a count of how many we've done together since this thing started. And it's definitely in the double digits, probably way more than that, right? We've been trying to find ways to find happiness. One thing that I'll share a little bit more about toward the end here in just a few minutes is even in the middle of really difficult challenges. I've got a 3-year-old daughter right now that's going through chemotherapy. My word, how do you find happiness when you're trying to put your head down and get through that? We're halfway through. We've got many months of that ahead of us. How do you take the pit that you feel in your stomach while she's going through this course of treatment, the way that it's impacting your whole family, and say, okay, can we still be happy? And yet I have a wife and beautiful kids who teach me every day that it's still okay to be happy in the middle of this, who dress up in silly costumes and build forts, and we do it together, right? 10 minutes before I started this talk, there were video games happening out there and shouting and whatever else. These sorts of things. Oh my goodness, we've got a little guest here. Hey, come here. Speaking of the little 3-year-old, hey, do you want to tell them any lessons you've learned that they should know about? No lessons? Can you say we should be happy?
I'm stuck.
You're stuck?
My leg.
Your leg is stuck. Okay, sweetie. Can you say hi to everybody? There's lots of people watching. Can you say hi, everybody?
Hi.
Have you had anything fun to do today?
Yeah.
What have you done fun?
Oh, we are just coloring.
You're just coloring?
Mm-hmm.
And did you build your forts?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you say bye to everyone?
Bye.
Okay, sweetie. Thank you. That wasn't scripted, by the way. I think it was scripted by people watching upstairs. That wasn't scripted. So, but you get the point, right? But take a moment, smile, breathe, laugh, right? Do what you can because you need to, and that's what it's all about, right? Okay, let's move to the next few. There will be time for that later. I don't have many regrets in life. I've been very blessed. I've been very fortunate. I've experienced an incredible number of things that if I could go back and tell, again, 21-year-old me, 11-year-old me, the things that would have happened to me in my life, the things that I would have experienced and seen, and the things that I'm lucky enough to have in my life, I just said, no way. That's not possible. But I do have one regret. I've got probably more than one, and it's that I used to really believe that there will be time for that later. From my time as a little kid growing up in Cache Valley, I'd always wanted to see Europe. That was the place. That was the goal. That was the destination. I really wanted to get to see Europe, right? Friends went in college. They did the thing where you backpack around and ride the trains and whatever else. And I thought, I don't know. I've got to save my money. I'm going to law school, right? And then I spent a few years working and suddenly had a little disposable income. And I thought, I got to save my money, right? I got to go to graduate school and I've got to be frugal. And I didn't go. Then in graduate school, I was a lot closer to Europe. But again, I said I didn't have any money. I had student loans and I probably could have spent some student loan dollars, but I thought, no, I've got to be frugal, right? And even in the years that immediately followed, I didn't go, right? I'm very lucky to have found a partner and a wife who said, no, we've got to do this. Life is for the living. Let's go, right? I'm lucky now because work actually takes me there sometimes. But but challenged by my wife to say, well, no, we need to go do this. Just stop worrying about what comes next. Stop worrying about you've got to have every last student loan paid off. We've got to go, right? There will be time for things later, but if there's something that matters to you, go do it now. That's that. I'm going to push to the next one. You need to be at least a little ruthless in order to be successful. What I knew of success, I knew from the movies growing up, right? What does it look like to be successful in business? What does it look like to be successful in an organization? You got to be tough, right? You got to give it to people. You got to make sure that people know that you're the person that they have to respect because of your toughness, right? Well, or you're ruthless. You're willing to do anything to get ahead. And I also used to think at 21. This is weird, but I've always thought a little bit about my brand and my legacy. And at 21, I would have told you that it would be most important that I be remembered at the end of my life for being the smartest person that people knew. That whenever Aaron Andersen walked into a room, he was the smartest person in that room, right? That was my aspiration. That was the goal. And you got to convey that, and you got to show that, and you got to be ruthless. You got to I've learned it a lot of different ways. It started with 3 years when I was a student there, 3 years working alongside the best professor and mentor that's ever existed. But 3 years working alongside Ross Peterson, who tragically probably not all of you know. But if you're at Utah State for a lot of decades, you couldn't help but know him, and I got to work alongside him. And Ross taught me a lesson at 21 that I haven't forgotten, and that's this: that people are what's most important. Full stop. Take good care of people, you'll be okay. You'll do all right. And no matter how many different shifts in my plan that I've had, no matter how many different occasions I've had to think about different settings that I'm working in, doesn't matter. If you take care of people, you're going to be okay. Now, of course, work hard at what you do. Be really good at what you do. Be dedicated to it, right? And now I think about it, and you know what I think? When I think about what I want from how I want people to remember me someday, sure, I want them to know that I was smart, and sure, I want them to know that I worked really hard and that I was really good. But I hope that people don't think that Aaron Andersen was the smartest person I ever knew. I hope that they think, you know what, he was, if not he was one of the nicest people I ever knew. And you know what's funny? That works in business. It works in organizations, right? The CEOs that I interact with, the presidents of universities, they work hard, they're dedicated, but the best ones among them are the people that take care of people. They're kind, they're decent. These notions that I had where you had to be tough and things, well, sure, you got to make tough decisions, but that doesn't mean you can't be kind and decent to people. And that's something that I'm sure glad I've learned by now. I'm sure glad I had a chance to learn it a couple decades ago, right? Okay, let's keep going quickly, and I want to leave some time here for questions, so I'm going to go fast at the end with this one. Then I'm going to spend a little time on the last one, then we'll go. Cynicism and skepticism are the best signals of intelligence. I have a great respect. There are people who are incredible at poking holes in things. But I realized many years later, you know why I don't want to be a lawyer? You know why I didn't want to go to law school? Because I don't like deconstructing things. I don't like looking at things through a lens that says, oh, how can we break that down? How can we find the flaw in that argument, right? And again, I have friends, colleagues, you name it, that are excellent at this. They do it with tact and with decency. That's great. I don't look at things that way. I prefer to look, the world around us is changing. I feel like you've got a choice. You can either build or you can tear down. I kind of like being about the building of it, right? I choose to build. Higher education is changing. I like being in a spot where I can help not just institutions, but systems of higher education think about how to build themselves differently. And I like to be optimistic about that. Sure, there's plenty to be pessimistic about and plenty of challenges that exist out there, but hope, optimism, care, to me, that's a foundation for signaling intelligence. I sit in a lot of meetings with really smart people at really smart organizations. And when someone speaks up and says, here's why that won't work, I go, okay, well, here we go. But when someone walks in the room and says, I have got an idea, I look at that person and say, okay, let's go. Right? That's invigorating. That to me is a sign of real intelligence and a sign of optimism that I think we need. Right? So I think that's important. Last one is, and this is really personal. I'm not sure I can do this. At 21, I looked at the things that I wanted to do with my life, and I said, I don't know. I'm genuinely not okay. Well, I talk a big game, but eventually I'm gonna be able to. No, I looked at things and thought, I hope I have the courage. I hope I have the courage to go, and not just the courage to pursue a career in X, Y, or Z, or to go to a big school and do a big thing, but the courage to move across the country by myself, right, or whatever else. I'm pretty open about this. I battle with anxiety. I didn't know it at the time. At 21, I didn't know it. I didn't know what to call this thing that I was, sort of fighting with and fighting against. But a few years later, when it was time for me to move across the country, it got really real. I had panic attacks my second semester at Cornell that nearly took me out of school, right? I got to Harvard and said, oh, felt the same things coming on. And I thought, I don't know if I can do it. I still remember the day. It's a dumb story, but I sort of have to give myself little milestones to get to. Okay, if I can just do this, then I can do it, right? If I can just put the car in drive, right? If I can just make it to the end of this block. And now if I can just make it to the end of this mile, right? I still remember, so I stopped partway when I was actually moving to New York from Utah. I still remember I stopped for a couple weeks at my sister's house. At the time, they were living in Indiana. And so my sister and my brother-in-law and their two kids at the time lived there. And I stayed with them for a little bit, right? It's hard enough to leave home. And then I had to kind of do it all over again when I left for that final leg of the drive to go move to New York, in a day. So I still remember pulling out of the parking lot of the apartment that they lived in that morning and thinking this thought. I remember thinking, I'm not sure I can do this, right? I'd already said goodbye to my family, and I'd said, and I'd spent 2 years away as a missionary, and I'd done all these other whatever. But the lesson I learned that day is it doesn't get easier, right? You still have to confront this thing that says, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I can battle this anxiety. I'm not sure I can do this. I still remember thinking, okay, just don't turn around because they're waving. I just got to keep going. I've got to get to New York. I've got this big thing that's in store for me, and I'm going to do it, right? But I still remember leaving Muncie, Indiana, and sort of counting the blocks, and then watching the blocks turn into miles, and watching the miles turn into cornfields, and the cornfields of Ohio turning into the lakes of New York, and then you're there, right? Same thing happened the very first time as a consultant that I sat in a boardroom with a CEO. And this was a CEO in an industry that I didn't know 6 months before we took on the engagement with them, right? I'm an expert in higher education. I'm conversant with university presidents. That's fine. But I was talking to the CEO of one of the largest chains of grocery stores in the United States. And he had just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars paying me and my team to come in and help them architect a new strategy. And I'm in the room with him. This is a $5 billion company. And he looks across the table at me at the end of a 2-hour presentation. Says, Aaron, what do we do? Well, my first thought was to say, I don't know, man. Right? The anxiety welled right up, and I said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can answer this question. It's going to mean quite literally hundreds of millions of dollars to this organization. Can I do this? I had to take a deep breath, had to lean on what I knew, had to go back to slide number 2 in the presentation and say, okay, let's start back here. If you do this, this will happen. If you do this, and lean on the work that we had done to get us there. And I realized, wait a minute, as I'm talking here, I can do this, right? Last story. I'm going to get emotional again, and it's about my little girl that was just here. So we have gone now to 9 sessions of chemotherapy. The father, I don't know that I would wish that on my worst enemy, but I've learned some things from her through this that will stay with me through the rest of my days. First of all, when the doctors told us that she was going to need chemotherapy because of the tumor in her hip and in her back, I remember thinking, like, I'm not sure I can do this, right? Let alone a little 3-year-old girl. So we went to the first one, and I didn't know what chemotherapy really entailed. You know, you have acquaintances or friends go through this and you hear a little bit about it. But I didn't know what really happened. I knew what happened, but I didn't know what really happened. They hook a tube up to this little port that had been surgically implanted in her chest. And I didn't know what to expect when they started the medicine, right? But about 3 minutes into, and there were a lot of tears, you know, when they first had to put the tube in and everything else, and she powered through it and things. There was something that happened um, after she started getting the medicine that I will never forget. It's happened every time since. So about 3 minutes in, after she starts getting the poison into her, that she can start to taste it in her mouth. And she gags a little bit. Every time she gags a little bit. And the very first time and every subsequent time, I look at her and say, okay, do you want them to stop it for a minute? Because they can pause it, right? I say, do you want me to have them stop this for a minute? Do you want? And she's crying and she's gagging and she looks at me and says, Dad, it's okay. I can do it. I can do it, Dad. I can do this. And I think, well, if she can do this, then that last lesson, boy, I'll tell you, if she can do this, if she can power through that, I'm pretty sure I can do just about anything. So that's where I'll leave you. I took a couple more minutes than I intended. I know that we've got a few minutes left here at the end. I'm happy to take questions. I have not been able to stay abreast of the questions that have been coming in. I've noticed that a few have come in via chat. London, I'm just going to ask that you screen questions. Tell me the name of the person who's asking the question first, and then I'll tell you if I'm taking a question from them, because I'm not interested in hearing from my family members at all. I'm teasing.
Aaron, thank you so much for everything you've shared so far. I personally have really enjoyed it. And as people in the chat have said too, it sounds like some of them have really enjoyed it as well. So one of our first questions that came in is from Steve. And how do you feel your undergraduate experience at Utah State prepared you for your Ivy League graduate programs?
So that's a great question, and I'll take it one step further and say not just for for my time at Cornell and Harvard, because I'll tell you, I was worried. I was worried that when I got to Cornell, like, is this going to stand up against this? I will tell you very quickly, 100% yes. My experience at Utah State was wonderful, and I learned an incredible amount from the professors I had, from the friends that I had, and it took me a minute to be sure of that. But I realized once I got there and once I got into my coursework, wait a second, I can hang with them. Everything that I got at Utah State was more than enough to make me ready, was more than enough to make sure that I was prepared for this. I learned to write. I learned how to critically think. I learned how to think about problems from new angles, new directions, right? And from all the different, again, professors and mentors that I had there, thank goodness I was paying attention. I was a little bit headstrong, and I thought I'm smart enough that I maybe glide through. But I was also humble enough to know, no, hold on a second. Like, listen to this, right? So when Fran Titchener says, Aaron, man, you did not need 6 pages to say this one thing. Like, slim it down, buddy. I listened, right? And I'm still not particularly good at making things more concise, but that made me a better writer, and I could take that to the work that I did, but also in the work that I do now. I hinted at this, but part of what I think makes our firm really good and really interesting is that we come at things from different angles. Again, we are not. This isn't to say that an MBA isn't valuable. You need it, right? Like, it's incredibly valuable, and I think I've gotten sort of an MBA equivalent over my decade in consulting. But I also look at things differently, right? I think back to when Mick Nichols had us go back and do inventories based on historical records of people's wills, and how that helps you as a fact finder, right? How that helps you is like, wow, how am I gonna make a story out of this, right? And now I can make a story out of very scant data, in part because I had a professor like Mick Nichols who taught us how to look at things and connect dots, and think critically about how to evaluate things. So I look, I'll just say, especially relative to an education in the colleges of humanities and social sciences, I think it's actually incredibly valuable. Now, that doesn't excuse any of you from going and taking classes if you're interested in getting into business, right? Or like I said before, in math. But I, at no point did I feel ill prepared once I sort of got acclimated. I felt like, no, I've got everything I need to be successful here.
Perfect. Okay, another one here for you. What advice would you give to students thinking about borrowing money to help pay for college or grad school?
It's a tough one. I didn't have the money to pay for any of it, right? So I was, like I said before, I was trying to save. I was fortunate because I got a pretty good scholarship at Cornell. That's part of, I sort of had a debt threshold that I set for myself. I did the math and said, okay, I'm willing to go into this amount of debt but no more, which is why it enabled me to say I can go pursue more education because most of Cornell is paid for, right? Having said that, make sure that the path that you're going on is going to be able to have the kind of ROI to pay back what you need to take out. That's sincere, right? Because there are some paths where it doesn't make sense to take on gargantuan debt because that will be an anchor that holds you back from doing what you want to do for many years, right? I've not felt held back by it because I've pursued something that a career in consulting is meets our needs. We do okay, and I didn't have to take up to a threshold quite to the threshold that I sort of would have anticipated. So I guess I was a little bit lucky in that regard.
Perfect. Okay, I've got one last question here for you. You talked about the importance of going beyond networking to make meaningful connections, and you've graciously offered to talk to students via email. So do you have any advice for students looking to start a meaningful conversation with someone new, and how can you overcome the feelings of intimidation that you might feel?
Oh my goodness, reach out, right? And look, let's be clear. Some people will reject you, right? Like some people that you've looked up to or that you want to reach out to they won't make time for you. They won't even respond. Some people will say, look, I'm too busy for this and things. But my experience has told me and shown me that more often than not, the people are absolutely willing. That's part of how I found the program that I found at Cornell that I was so excited about. I actually took time to send emails to professors at probably a dozen different programs and said, hey, I'm kind of curious, how does this work here, right? And it was the kindness and the responses and the dialogue and exchange that I had with Jerry Ziegler, who by all accounts did not need to spend his time talking to a prospective student like me, right? This is a former commissioner of higher education in the state of Pennsylvania. He'd been a dean at Cornell for 3 decades. He'd worked on the Marshall Plan in Europe. I mean, this is a venerable human being. And here he was just talking to me, and I was nobody, right, to him. I hadn't applied to school there yet. And he and I exchanged emails over a period of several months. And I got there and I met him and I said, my word, like, you're such an impressive human being, and yet you were taking the time to talk to me, right? And that's been part of the lesson, right? Is that it's surprising that people are willing to talk. Be okay when people don't respond, because some people don't, right? And some people won't make the time. But if you're willing to reach out and find someone that you're like, you know what, like, they're doing something cool, or that's a professor or program I'd like to get into, or anything else along those lines, oh my goodness, reach out, right? Send a note. Find them on Twitter. Don't find me on Twitter. I have like 3 tweets. It's not worth your time, and mostly it's about music that I like. But send me an email, right? Like I've always, again, speaking of lessons learned, I've always felt like, goodness, if I can pay back 1/10 of the kindness that's been shown to me by the kinds of people who ought to have had better things to do with their time, right? Then I'll have done a few good things, right? And so that's always been my approach. And I'll tell you, like, I look around, and again, I had this perception from the movies or wherever that people were always tough and mean and not willing to. I don't know. That's not been my experience, because I engage with some pretty senior folks in pretty big organizations and doing really important stuff, and people tend to be willing if you're willing to be vulnerable and reach out to them, right? So again, be open to the probability that there will be some rejection along the way, but my hunch is you're going to find some people that will be more than willing to lend their time to help along the way too.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, London, for leading us through those questions. Thank you, audience, for participating. And Aaron, I just want to thank you so much. I mean, you were so honest in sharing your experiences with us. We appreciate your candor and your honesty, even in terms of how you feel about pizza in Cache Valley. But
there's better places there now. Let's be clear.
No, I understand. I went to school on the East Coast as well, and I feel you when you talk about the Boston supermarket employees. That's absolutely true. But we really do appreciate your willingness to not only lay out your experiences in such a creative and fun way, but also just your willingness to really dive deep and let us know what helped you along the way and the ways in which you set yourself back and then you had to learn from it and move forward. And that's just really important stuff for students to hear while they're trying to navigate the process themselves. So thank you so much for taking time to share that with us today. Thank you to our audience for listening. Thank you. I know we had some of your former professors like Ross Peterson in the audience. So we appreciate that Aggies are lifelong Aggies, and we hope that current students listening today, appreciate the value of their faculty as well and see them as great connections to be made. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We know we've run a little long, but we appreciate you staying with us, and we hope you'll join us again when we do this again soon. So thank you everyone. I wish everyone a wonderful day.